Welcome to Class 1, Intro to Interface, Paint Tools, and Brushes. Now that we've gone through the overview for the course, we can start on Class 1. Here I will lay the foundation with a tour of the interface as it relates to the Paint module, then briefly run through the Paint window that includes the Paint Tools, Brush Profile, Paint Tab area, and Paint presets. Then I will give a quick demo of the 16 different paint brushes. So you can see here that I've already loaded in my footage. I have a 16-bit EXR sequence here, and I've already created a session in my trees window, and I'll give you a little refresher on how you can create a session. You can do that 3 different ways. You can either click on your footage here, and you can choose the little icon down here in the lower left. You can go up to the menu bar and click Session, New Session, or Command N. So when the session dialog box comes up, you can name your session, which is a good idea, and then you can choose your template. So I typically choose the Roto Paint template here, and you can see that that is an option, and I'm given the streamlined workspace. You can also make your own workspaces, and you can save them, and you can see down in this pull-down menu here, I've already saved some workspaces and assigned them to some hotkeys. And you also want to double-check all the different parameters like the size, the aspect ratio, the duration, the FPS, and the start frame. I happen to know that my footage is 24 frames per second, and so I'm just going to change that here. Sometimes it's just not read incorrectly, and you just want to double check that. And then you want to make sure your bit depth is correct at float, the correct float. You do not want to paint in a different bit depth or it will not be correct when you render out. So here you can see I'm at float 16 and the selection is correct right here. So I'm just going to cancel out of this since I've already created a session. And so you might be wondering, why do I choose the Roto Paint setup when I'm doing a paint session? It's because I tend to use Roto shapes and tracking when I'm doing my paint tasks. And so that's why I use the Roto node. So now I'm going to go through the viewer tools as they pertain to the paint module. So up here on the upper left, you can see that this is the active node pull down. And right now we are on the output node. If I go over here and click on the paint node, you can see that this becomes the active node. If I click on this button here, that is where I can create an additional viewer, and I'll just click that. You can see now we have an additional paint viewer, but we could put this selection to, like, say, the Roto node, and then you can nest this in to your workspace and use it as you go through your workflow. But I'm just going to close that out right now because we don't need it. But it's a great tool and I use it all the time. And then here is the view for the output. You can see I have all these different choices for the view when I'm in the paint node. If I'm in the Roto node, you're just going to have a different selection depending on the node that you are in. And here I have my update mode and I set that to drag, especially when I'm painting. So every time I do something in the viewer, it is automatically updated. And here we have the proxy pull down, and this is important because you do not want to work in a proxy mode when you are painting. You always want to be one-to-one. And then you have your color space, X-form, and LUT. If you have a LUT, you can load that in. And your viewer gain and gamma controls here. And here we have the newer feature. It is the onion skin viewer mode. So if I toggle that on and I have the little menu open, you can see that I have these different parameters here that I can set to help me view my frame by frame paint animations. I can actually see frames before and after and have a mix. So that is a very helpful tool as opposed to just having the straight onion skin mode. I'll deselect that. And then we have the snapshot tool here. And this is a great tool to use when you are trying to match grain. And then we have the all important ROI icon here, which stands for region of interest. And this is where you can make a crop to save memory, especially when you're painting and you want to load in a lot of frames or just work on a small area. This is a great feature to use, and you can also animate your crop as well and set keyframes. And down here we have some different parameters. You can see you can reset it. And then also if you just want to, if you set your ROI and you don't want to see the outlines like this, you can just click the icon again and you are ready to go. So, but for now, we'll just reset that and we will disable the controls right here. And then we have the magnifier tool. So while I don't use this all the time, it is very handy. So if I click on there and I'm in the paint tool, and now you can see I have this, let me turn that off. Okay, I need to be selected on a brush here. So now you can see if I am in the magnifier tool that wherever my cursor is, it is a magnification down here on the lower right. I'm going to turn that off for now. And then the next icon I want to talk about is the stabilize icon here. This is stabilize view. We don't have anything that I want to look at right now, but this is great if you want to paint in a stabilized mode and it will not, it's not destructive. And then here we have the rotate tool. If you want to paint in a rotated view, this is great, especially for if you have straight lines that you're painting that are vertical, or if you're doing a screen replacement. It really is handy. Just be careful, it is a little bit memory intensive. So I'll just reset that back. I'm just going to deselect this tool. And then we have the outline tool where this turns off the outlines for the tools when you're in the viewer. So for say if you're painting and all of a sudden you can't see your paintbrush, just double check this because it just means that that's off. And then when you turn it back on, then you see that you have your cursor back. And then we have our trees window here. I only have one session, but you can have multiple sessions. And I find when I'm doing complicated paint tasks that I might divide up my work into different sessions, such as degraining session or a clean plate session or a comping session or just some straight painting. So that I find really helpful. And then you have the different icons here. If you want to show the overview, you can see your tree down here in the overview. I'm just going to click that off right now because I have a very simple tree. And then you have the different other options here, extract a node, disable a node, or you can just click the D key. And then you have icons where you can load a node or save a node. And I find this helpful, especially if I'm working with grain presets that I want to save from a grain node, or if I'm using the Neat Video plugin and I'm degraining shots and I want to save a plugin and use it for a different but similar shot in the same sequence. Okay, now you see we are selected on the paint node here in the trees window. And over here on the toolbar on the left, we are selected into the color tool. And down here you can see in the paint window, we have the presets, the brush parameters section, the brush profile section, and the paint tab section. So let's start by working with the brush profile area here. You can see on the screen, I have a tiny little pink dot and a cursor. I'm going to increase my brush size. And there's a couple ways to do that. I can choose the brackets on the right side of the keyboard and just click the right bracket to increase or the left bracket to decrease. Or I can use the sliders here down in the paint window, or I can do the pop-up as well and make that a size of 50. Or the most common way, or I would say the easiest way for me, is the Control Command key, and we'll just drag the size of the brush that way. And there we have our larger brush. So real quick, I'm just going to open up the Paint Preferences tab, and there's a couple different ways to do that. We can go to the Silhouette Preferences down here from the menu, or we can use the hotkey, or we can click this little icon here to bring up the Preferences window. So you can see here we have a couple different sections, and we'll just talk about what's up here. I have the brush outline color, which I've set to pink, or you can choose whatever color you like. And then you can change the opacity of the outline. You can choose what crosshair preference you like. I have it on for on right now, but you can have it off, or you can choose the on-off selection. So it's mostly on, but when you start painting, it will turn off so you can see your painted area a little bit easier. And you have a couple different choices here, which we can talk about as we go along. And then we have the larger clone tool preference section here, which will be in a different class because the clone tool is really a feature in itself. So after you make any changes here, you want to click Apply and OK. And now when we're back in the Paint tool, we can start playing around with the different brush profile settings. So here you can set your size, you can change the opacity, you can have the different softness, and you can see the update here in the little window. If I'm going to just change this to like maybe a 75% softness. And then here you have the fall off, and this changes the quality of the outside of your brush with the fall off. So if I change that, you can see it's a different edge quality, but I usually just keep that at 1. You can change the flatness of the brush to more of a disc. You can change the angle, and you can change the spacing, but I don't really work with the spacing as much. I'm going to set these back to the default. And as another option here, you have a choice of a circle or a square. You can see that a little bit better if I just take down the softness. And then I'll train that back to a circle. And then you have the choices of airbrush or buildup. So if you are in the airbrush, if you check that, you're going to have a slower buildup with the paint when you use this feature here. If you just click down here, you can see it just goes on a little bit slower. And I'll just Command Z to get rid of that. And then if you click build up, for example, if you have a 50% opacity brush here, that you will not be clamped if you keep making brush strokes by the 50%. You can actually get up to 100%. Okay, so we'll just Command Z and get rid of those paint strokes. And then I'm going to just turn off build up here. And then, so while we're in the color tool, you might as well go through this a little bit here. You can either choose a color by just clicking some of the little paint pots here, and this is the active color, or you can go through the different tabs here and select your color and get the color you want. Or if you want to select a color from the screen, if your cursor is over the viewer and screen, you just click the period key, and then you are getting a color down here. Okay, next we're going to talk about this paint tab section here and how you can paint into the different channels. So here we selected on RGB. So when I'm painting, you can see I'm just going to do some painting here. It's just in all RGB channels. I can also paint in just the red channel or the green channel or the blue channel, but I can also paint in the alpha channel, and you can either paint only in the alpha channel or with RGB at the same time. So here I want to paint in RGB plus alpha, and that's really helpful. So if I make a stroke like that and I cycle through the alpha channels, you can see that my alpha is being painted. And one thing to double check before you start this is that I like to set my source to have a transparent or black alpha. I click on the source and I go to the fill type and I click transparent. So I'll go back to the paint node here and I'll just deselect the alpha. And then you can also paint in some different modes. We're painting in the normal mode. You can also paint in the color mode. These are some sophisticated painting modes that are really great to use, especially when you are doing some beauty work. So if I'm in the color, I'm painting only the color. And if I click the detail button right here, then when I'm painting in this mode, I'm only painting on the detail and preserving the color. So another way to kind of see what I'm talking about is that if I'm in the paint node, I want to go up to the view output. So I want to look at the color layer, and that gives you an idea of what you are actually painting. And you can go to the detail layer and you can see that as well. And then the hotkeys for that, I believe, are 8 and 9, so color and detail. And they'll go back to 1, which is the output. And 2 is the foreground if you want to see before and after. And then you can also use an alpha as a mask to help paint. So to do that, you need to have an alpha that you want to use, and then you can click this Obey Alpha tab here. So in this example, I'll go up to the Roto node, and you can see I have already some layers that include some tracking and some Roto. I'm going to just turn on my Surfer G mat here, and you can see I have a mat here. We'll zoom in for the Surfer. It's just a G mat. We'll go to the Paint tab here. I'm going to select Obey Alpha. I'm going to select my Surfer G mat, and then when I paint, I'll just choose color here, House and Green. You can see that I'm painting within my mat. But if we really don't want that, Command Z, and I want to paint outside my mat, I can just invert the alpha. And now you can see I'm painting outside of that mask. Okay, we'll just Command Z out of that. And you really do have a lot of different options when you're painting with the alpha channel. we'll go through those as the course goes on. Okay, and you also have a choice of your alpha source. If you have different sources here, you can pull down from there. And you have your paint source, which is something we'll go over later. And like I said, we have our transform here. And this transform pull down will pull down any selections you have for tracking for painting. So inside here, you can see in my roto node, I do have 2 layers here, my Cliff and my Surfer GMAT. And in my paint node, since I'm hooked up here with the object layer, my roto output object output is connected to the paint object input. And so that means the paint node is able to use what is in the roto node. And it can also use a tracker node in the same way. But in this case, I just have a roto node, a paint node. It's hooked up correctly. And then I can choose either my Surfer GMAT or my Cliff for my transform information. And if I want to see my roto while I am painting, if I'm not sure where my edge is, I can click the show shapes. And you can see now I can see my mat here. And I will do some painting. And then I can kind of see where that edge is. But it's still a little bit distracting. And another thing that you can change to help us out is you can click the Paint Preferences button here. And I'm going to choose Hide Brush Outline while painting. I'm going to click that on. I'm going to click Apply. OK. And then I'll just go to the next frame. And you can see now when I'm painting that I'm not seeing the roto outline when I'm painting. Okay, next we move on to the presets. I'm just going to unclick some of these parameters here. Go to a clean frame. So here in the paint window, you have the presets area, and you can save up to 10 paintbrush presets. And how you do that is you make a preset for what you would like. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off this roto shape here. So I'm in the paint node here. I'm just going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to make a couple different brushes. I want a green brush, and I want 100% opacity and 100% softness. And I'm just going to click the Save button and click the 1. And then maybe I'm going to make a red brush, and I'm going to do the same. And maybe I want to change the opacity to 50% and have a different kind of brush here. And then you can do this with any brush in the Brush Tools tab over here, as well as different source frames, but we'll go into more of that later. So then now you can see if I click the 1 that I'm painting with, I have my green brush. If I click the 2, I have my red brush. And there's also hotkeys associated with all of these presets. So it's Alt 0 through 1. So Alt 3, if I click that, I'm automatically in my 3rd selection. And another way to work around, to work with the presets tab here is that so say if you want to change a preset, I don't want this one anymore, or I want to just change it. I want this 100%. I click that, I hold down the Shift key, and while this number is highlighted, hold down Shift, click Save, then my preset is now saved to 100%. And that's helpful, so you don't have to click Save and the number again. And then if you want to delete a preset, you can also do that. And the way to do that is that when you want to clear one, you press Save, and then Alt-click the number. Alt-click 3, and now you can see that preset is now no longer available. And there you have it. So I hope you enjoyed Class 1, and we'll see you in the next class.